Greetings, listeners of the Latin Prayer Podcast. Welcome back for another episode. Having concluded our series on Pope Leo XIII's encyclicals on the Holy Rosary, I thought it would be fitting to take a slightly different direction for our next set of meditations. We will begin moving through St. Alphonsus Liguori's meditations on the Blessed Sacrament. Today, we will be covering the introduction, and in subsequent meditations, we will move through his work. We won't do all of it because there's so much to go through. But we will look at visits to the Blessed Virgin, we'll look at different spiritual communions, and we'll look at what the writings of the saint have to say contained in this beautiful, beautiful work. As we continue to expand the offerings of this podcast, we spend a lot of time looking at the writings of the saints, those who have walked before us, to draw from this rich depth of their spiritual consolations, their insights, and their wisdom. So something you will find in all of them that they all had in common was this very special devotion to our Lord in the Most Blessed Sacrament. And my hope is that this particular set of meditations will help you learn something new about yourself and your relationship with our Lord through a few select passages. I pray that what we do will draw you closer to our Lord and guide you and your family on the journey toward heaven. So, let us begin. Introduction. The visit to the Most Holy Sacrament. Our holy faith teaches us, and we are bound to believe, that in the consecrated host, Jesus Christ is really present under the species of bread. But we must also understand that he is thus present on our altars, as on a throne of love and mercy, to dispense graces, and there to show us the love which he bears us, by being pleased to dwell night and day, hidden in the midst of us. It is well known that the Holy Church instituted the festival of Corpus Christi with a solemn octave, and that she celebrates it with the many usual processions and so frequent expositions of this most holy sacrament, that men may thereby be moved gratefully to acknowledge and honor this loving presence and dwelling of Jesus Christ in the sacrament of the altar, by their devotions, thanksgivings, and the tender affections of their souls. O God, how many insults and outrages has not this amiable Redeemer had, and has he not daily to endure in this sacrament on the part of those very men for whose love he remains upon their altars on earth? Of this he indeed complained to his sister, his dear servant sister Margaret Alacoque, as the author of the Book of Devotion to the Heart of Jesus relates. One day, as she was in prayer before the Most Holy Sacrament, Jesus showed her his heart on a throne of flames, crowned with thorns and surrounded by a cross, and thus addressed her. Behold that heart, which has loved men so much, and which has spared itself nothing, and has even gone so far as to consume itself, thereby to show them its love. But in return, the greater part of men only show me ingratitude, and this by their irreverences, tepidity, sacrileges, and contempt which they offer me in this sacrament of love. And that which I feel the most acutely is, that they are hearts consecrated to me. Jesus then expressed his wish that the first Friday after the octave of Corpus Christi should be dedicated as a particular festival in honor of his adorable heart, and that on that day all souls who loved him should endeavor by their homage and by the affections of their souls to make amends for the insults which men have offered him in this sacrament of the altar. And, at the same time, he promised abundant graces to all who should thus honor him. We can thus understand what our Lord said of old by his prophet, that his delight is to be with the children of men, since he is unable to tear himself from them even when they abandon and despise him. This also shows us how agreeable all those souls are to the heart of Jesus, who frequently visit him and remain in his company in the churches in which he is under the sacramental species. He desired Saint Mary Magdalene of Pazzi to visit him in the Most Blessed Sacrament 33 times a day, and this beloved spouse of his faithfully obeyed him, and in all her visits to the altar approached it as near as she possibly could, as we read in her life. But let all those devout souls who often go to spend their time with the Most Blessed Sacrament speak. Let them tell us the gifts, the inspirations which they have received, the flames of love which are there enkindled in their souls, the paradise which they enjoy in the presence of this hidden God. The servant of God, a great Sicilian missionary, Father Luis Lanusa, was even in his youth, and as a layman, so enamored of Jesus Christ that he seemed unable to tear himself from the presence of his beloved Lord. Such were the joys which he there experienced that his director commanded him, in virtue of obedience, not to remain there for more than an hour. The time having elapsed, he showed in obeying, says the author of his life, that in tearing himself from the bosom of Jesus Christ, he had to do himself just such violence as a child that has to detach itself from its mother's breast in the very moment in which it is satiating itself with the utmost avidity. And when he had to do this, we are told that he remained standing with his eyes fixed on the altar, making repeated inclinations as if he knew not how to quit his Lord, whose presence was so sweet and gracious to him. St. Aloysius, it was also forbidden to remain in the presence of the Most Blessed Sacrament, and as he used to pass before it, finding himself drawn, so to speak, by the sweet attractions of his Lord, and almost forced to remain there, he would, with the greatest effort, tear himself away, saying, with an excess of tender love, "Depart from me, O Lord, depart." There it was also that St. Francis Xavier found refreshment in the midst of his many labors in India, for he employed his days in toiling for souls and his nights in the presence of the Most Blessed Sacrament. St. John Francis Regis did the same thing, and sometimes finding the church closed, he endeavored to satisfy his longings by remaining on his knees outside the door, exposed to the rain and cold, that at least at a distance he might attend upon his comforter, concealed under the sacramental species. St. Francis of Assisi used to go to communicate all his labors and undertakings to Jesus in the Most Holy Sacrament. But tender indeed was the devotion of St. Wenceslaus, Duke of Bohemia, to the Most Holy Sacrament. This holy king was so enamored of Jesus there present that he not only gathered the wheat and grapes and made the hosts and wine with his own hands and then gave them to be used in the holy sacrifice, but he used even during the winter to go at night to visit the church in which the Blessed Sacrament was kept. These visits enkindled in his beautiful soul such flames of divine love that their ardor imparted itself even to his body and took from the snow on which he walked its wonted cold. For it is related that the servant who accompanied him in these nightly excursions, having to walk through the snow, suffered much from the cold. The holy king, on perceiving this, was moved to compassion and commanded him to follow him and only to step in his footmarks. He did so, and never afterwards felt the cold. In the visits you will read other examples of tender affection with which souls inflamed with love of God to dwell in the presence of the Most Holy Sacrament. But you will find that all the saints were enamored of this most sweet devotion, since indeed it is impossible to find on earth a more precious gem or a treasure more worthy of all our love than Jesus in the Most Holy Sacrament. Certainly amongst all the devotions after that of receiving the sacraments, that of adoring Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament holds the first place, is most pleasing to God, and the most useful to ourselves. Do not then, O devout soul, refuse to begin this devotion, and forsaking the conversation of men, dwell each day from this time forward for at least half or quarter of an hour in some church in the presence of Jesus Christ under the sacramental species. Taste and see how sweet is the Lord. Only try this devotion, and by experience you will see the great benefit that you will derive from it. Be assured that the time you will thus spend with devotion before this most divine sacrament will be the most profitable to you in life and the source of your greatest consolation in death and in eternity. You must also be aware that in a quarter of an hour's prayer spent in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, you will perhaps gain more than in all the other spiritual exercises of the day. It is true that in every place God graciously hears the petitions of those who pray to him, and having promised to do so, ask and you shall receive. Yet the disciple tells us that Jesus dispenses his graces in greater abundance to those who visit him in the Most Holy Sacrament. Blessed Henry Suso used also to say that Jesus Christ hears the prayers of the faithful more graciously in the sacrament of the altar than anywhere else. And where indeed did holy souls make their most beautiful resolutions, but prostrate before the Most Holy Sacrament? Who knows but that you also may one day, in the presence of the tabernacle, make the resolution to give yourself entirely to God. In this little book, I feel myself bound, at least out of gratitude to my Jesus in the Holy Sacrament, to declare that through the means of this devotion of visiting the Most Blessed Sacrament, which I practiced, though with so much stupidity and in so imperfect a manner, I abandoned the world in which unfortunately I lived until I was 26 years of age. Fortunate indeed will you be if you can detach yourself from it at an earlier period and give yourself without reserve to that Lord who has given himself without reserve to you. I repeat it, that indeed you will be blessed not only in eternity, but even in this life. Believe me, all is folly. Feasts, theaters, parties of pleasure, amusements, these are the goods of the world, but goods which are filled with the bitterness of gall and with sharp thorns. Believe me, who have experienced this and now weep over it. Be also assured that Jesus Christ finds means to console a soul that remains with a recollected spirit before the Most Blessed Sacrament, far beyond what the world can do with all its feasts and pastimes. Oh, how sweet a joy it is to remain with faith and tender devotion before an altar and converse familiarly with Jesus Christ, who is there for the express purpose of listening to and graciously hearing those who pray to him, to ask his pardon for the displeasures which we have caused him, to represent our wants to him, as a friend does to a friend, in whom he places all his confidence, to ask him for his graces, for his love, and for his kingdom. But above all, oh, what a heaven is it there to remain making acts of love towards that Lord who is on the very altar praying to the Eternal Father for us, and is there burning with love for us. Indeed, that love it is which detains him there, thus hidden and unknown, and when he is even despised by ungrateful souls. But why should we say more? Taste and see. And there you have it, folks, from the mouth of St. Alphonsus Liguori himself, and from other saints, on why we should cultivate this so special devotion. I can attest to developing a relationship with our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, that many favors, many favors have been granted to me, and many consolations have been given to me in those private moments with just him. And so I would encourage you to take up this practice, this devotion. You will not regret it. Subsequent meditations will follow, as I mentioned in the introduction. We will be looking at visits of the Blessed Virgin. We'll be looking at the act of spiritual communion and much more from this great work from St. Alphonsus Liguori. So until our next episode, may God love all of you and may Our Lady keep you.